No, we're live.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we will discuss the Republic and everything after the presentation.
Sure. We're live.
Okay, so we are live. I think we can wait 5 more minutes for more people to join in.
Sure.
Oh, for viewers. We should wait a bit.
Sure.
You know, I still find it delightful that there's 4 of us and each one of our names begins with M, like the first names begins with an M.
So even funnier, my middle name is Michał.
Nice.
So I'm Marcin Michał. So we have, let's say, 5 M's and 2 Michals out of that.
Exactly, but to be honest, I think there's Michał and Michaels like absolutely everywhere. Like even in our organization, it's like well, not talking about SFL, I'm talking about my employer. We have like 2 Michals already. So
Well,
I think
it's a good name.
yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, if anyone is doing an innovation, it's Michaels and Michał slowly, you know, getting into all society.
I'm not going to contest that. I actually have one of our policy researchers, and actually my friend is Michał, and he's also Polish. So yeah, I'm all for more Michals in public service.
Okay, I think that we can start. It's starting to get packed. And so I want to welcome everybody to our last webinar of this year. I'm here with Marcin Branowski, who is the CEO of, or the head of the British Conservation Alliance. He studies in London and he studies politics. My name is Marcus Formal. I am the CEO of Slovak Students for Liberty, and I am giving floor to Marcin.
Oh, thank you so much, Marcus. So thank you so much to the the Slovak Students for Liberty. It's a great pleasure to talk to you today, and thank you all for coming to participate in this webinar that I hope is going to be interesting to you. So what we're going to be talking about today is a very important topic in this day and age, because when you turn on the news and when the topics of environmentalism, of climate change comes up, what you often hear is how the current political system, the current economic strata that we are living in, how it is threatening to our environment, and how it needs to be dealt with, how it needs to be eliminated in order to achieve the environmental goals. And it is often advocated by people who think that it should be the role of the government to come in to regulate the economy, to take away people's resources and funnel them into environmentalist goals. And well, what I'm going to be advocating here today, and what I hope you're going to take out of this event, is that there are many more ways to achieve the environmental goals, rather than just looking at what the government can do, just pushing it away from our own action and focusing on the government. What I'm going to be talking here today is how every other person in the country, in the world, can themselves bring the positive change that is going to drive the movement towards more sustainable, more greener future. And we're going to start off by looking back at the environmental debate, and in general at how capitalism has interacted with environment. And it's going to be very important to set the stage, let's say, for this conversation, whether capitalism is compatible with environmentalism. Then we're going to set these two against each other and see what is the actual impact of capitalism, of the market on the environment. Then we are going to look into what market environmentalism is, trying to figure out what it implies and what are its goals. Then, based on that, we're going to have a look at the bottom-up approach to solving environmental problems, which is very much a centerpiece of the market environmentalist approach. And this is going to focus on the individuals, on the social groups, on various different measures that people without a coercive method can achieve environmental reforms. Then we're going to get into the government's burden, as I like to call it, which is what the government is doing, what the government feels it should be doing, and what are its actual actions and outcomes of the actions for the environment. And in the end, before we conclude, we're going to talk a bit about the enterprising sustainability. So basically, how private industries, how the market, the enterprises can affect our environment and how they can affect our progress towards sustainability. So first of all, when looking back into history, what is usually set as the moment where humanity has begun its encroachment on the environmental side, on our general global ecological sphere, is when we started the second industrial revolution. So a revolution that was very much based on coal, that was very much based on increasing our production, increasing the exploitation of the natural resources, and driving our production to levels that were unprecedented. And this is the moment that the level of deforestation, the level of production of CO2, of other greenhouse gases, has begun to skyrocket due to the newly developed steam engine that then was becoming more and more ever universal across Europe, across North America, and then across the world. And people often look at that and point, hey, look what capitalism, what the drive towards prosperity, what the drive towards growth did to humanity, what it did to the environment especially. And obviously it is incredibly important to point out that there was this level of exploitation, there was this level of externalities that have been produced. However, when we consider the bigger picture and the outcomes of this, we can see that the effect of capitalism and of the industrial progress is not that binary. So in order to do that, we need to analyze two factors. One is the drive to productivity. So that's the first graph on the left, and the Kuznets curve. So the drive to productivity is a everlasting since the first industrial revolutions. Progress towards having more for less, producing more from less time, from less resources, from fewer people, being able to achieve more with less exploitation. So this drive, this increased efficiency with every new invention that has been created, provided to us with the better effect of every single euro, every single minute that we spend on our economy, on our products. And that is absolutely necessary to look at this productivity when considering our impact on the environment. Because without improving our production, without being able to produce more for less, we can't keep our level of population, we can't keep our level of quality of life, including healthcare, including education, including heat, anything, food, anything that makes our lives possible needs to be done via economic measures, because there is no possibility when we have infinite resources. They're always going to be finite, and they're always going to be needed to be allocated in the best way possible. And the more efficient we do that, the better. And what brings us, well, it is brought to us by the market reforms, by entrepreneurs inventing new things all the time, competition, cooperation, people coming together to get more for less because they figure out a way to do so. And with all these ways, we can bring a more sustainable future. And that is very well illustrated by the Kuznets curve, which is on the right. And that shows that at the beginning, so for example, in the first two industrial revolutions, the pre-industrial economies increase diametrically the environmental degradation in terms in relation to the output that they are making, because they are learning that they can take so much new things from the ground and change them into products, into wealth. But there is a point when they are industrialized where they get through a turning point and turn away from this everlasting strive towards higher consumption, higher destruction of the environment. And whilst still increasing the GDP per capita, so the output, they start decreasing the level of degradation per capita, which means that thanks to this increased efficiency, thanks to this drive towards progress, they're able to now achieve this growth without having to destroy the environment whilst doing that. And we are going to see that on our own, looking at these graphs. I hope you are able to see them. Okay, so the first three, so the one on the left, top right, bottom left, these three show how how over time the GDP per capita was increasing, whilst the consumption based CO2 and production based CO2 production was decreased per capita, obviously. So despite all of these three countries, so United States, Slovakia, and Germany, all growing richer, they have been able to decrease the impact on the environment because they were becoming more and more productive, because they were becoming more and more efficient. And that is perfectly illustrated by the per capita CO2 emissions graph on the bottom right, where you can see that all the countries over time have been decreasing with the impact on the world. And that is not even per capita, that is in general production. So we can see that there is this very nice curve when they at the beginning, so up to the let's say the 80s, they increase in the negative impact, and then they start dropping down. And that is especially significant if you look at Russia, at Slovakia, at Belarus, and at Poland, which is very interesting because, as you may remember, we often tend to think about the Western countries as the ones who are more negative towards the environment, whilst it actually was the socialist, the communist countries of the East that were the most detrimental when it comes to the effect on the world. And whilst the US still continues to be the biggest producer of CO2, their production per capita is dropping rapidly. And when we look at, for example, Russia, it dropped in its production of CO2 from the moment that the Soviet Union dissolved to the moment where it started functioning as a, let's say, moderately market economy. The production of CO2 dropped by 40%. It's an unprecedented drop, and I don't think it ever is going to be repeated. And we can see that it's not, in fact, the capitalism that is the factor behind the environment being destroyed, but it's the human action and its lack of productivity, lack of efficiency, and lack of focusing this efficiency on improving our ability to produce things without destroying the environment. So, trying to define market environmentalism, I decided to point to these five different factors that need to be considered in achieving the goals the environmental goals in a market environmentalist way. So first of all, it is necessary for the government to limit in its action and focus itself on clean market-friendly reforms. So establishing the framework for a more market-friendly, but also environmentally friendly sort of market. So, for example, the regulation in such a way as to encourage electromobility or encourage investments in renewables, or including new forms of goods being traded rather than having to go through tariffs. All these different measures that we're going to also get into can be implemented on the government level. So even if we are market environmentalists, we don't only have to look at the bottom of the ladder of how our government and how our society functions, but we can look at all the different sides. But looking more downward, we can see the huge importance of innovation and entrepreneurship. So the fact that people need to advance, people need to compete, people need to work together in order to achieve great things and figure out new things, new ways to improve our world and improve our environment. Then another crucial factor in the market environmentalist approach is social change. So the necessity of bringing people to your side when making any decisions regarding environment, when trying to get anything done for a better planet. You need to make sure that people are on your side when doing that, and that they are willing to introduce these changes to their lives as well, rather than just having to wait for the government to do it for them, or having to, for example, police them into doing that. If they have to be policed to segregate the waste, then what's the point of doing that if you are going to be voted out of office in 4 years? It's better to show them why they need to do that, to give them incentives to do so, to point to the different ways how they are going to be positively impacted by that, rather than nagging them into do that and have to reverse your decision in a few years. And the last two important aspects, one of them is individual efforts. So the fact that you have to look at yourself first when trying to achieve these environmental reforms, or achieving environmental goals. So, for example, not only wait for the government to do something, but also introduce these various changes into your own life. And being able to do that is incredibly important, because we only have we have only 215 countries in the world. However, we have 7.8 billion people. And if these 7.8 billion people all come together and all start working for a better future, we would be already there. And without that, we can't accomplish anything. And the last one is international cooperation. And I don't only mean like some international drafts or some unions or other measures like that. But what is absolutely necessary is to be able to use the innovations that were introduced in one place and be able to cherish them in another, whether it's through being able to invest in, for example, you know how to do good new way of solar batteries, and you want to introduce them in a country that needs it. However, the government is protectionist and it doesn't allow for you to come there and invest in a solar power plant, because they don't, because it's a regulation, it's a barrier on trade. So what we should do is we should encourage this exchange, encourage this ability to for innovation to move beyond barriers and be established all across the world, and in the more market fashion, the better, without having to wait for example, China to move in and just convince the government with the money and implement everything by the government action. It's much better to negotiate with a private company than to having to negotiate with China. And the more countries see that, the more they are going to see of improvements on their part. So in order to achieve environmental goals, we have to know what they are. And these are the four main ones that need to be accomplished in order to get a greener future for securing a greener future for our kids and for our grandkids. And the first one is sustainable production and consumption. Without being able to produce things in a sustainable way, we won't be able to produce anything in no time. Another one is lowering greenhouse gas emissions. If we're going to have to fight all the externalities, all the negative outcomes of rising sea levels, of droughts, of hurricanes, of floods, then we are not going to have time nor money to think about improving our quality of life. Then restoring natural ecosystems is obviously absolutely necessary in order to achieve environmental goals, or in order to achieve a sustainable future, because without having anything to protect, because we lost all of that, what's really the point? And then curbing the negative human influence on environment is also absolutely necessary, because, well, we are sort of in a symbiosis with the world, although we are getting out of that much more than the world is. So we need to make sure that we are not going to kill the host organism here, and work with it rather than against it, because world is going to survive whether we are there or not. But we can only survive if the world is here with us, if Earth is here, and if it's in a good state. So a big part of achieving this sustainable production and consumption is moving to a more circular mode of economy. And obviously it's never going to be perfect, at least not now. However, we should still think about it as a goal towards that we can strive to. And that is a system that on the left you can see the traditional model, the linear model, where we take something from the ground, we change it, we produce it, and then we get out of it the product to consume, and we then dispose of it, we pollute. So we are not getting anything back that can be consumed again. Whilst in the circular model, the resources that we are using are constantly in this loop, and some of them right now we already do it. Like, for example, with glass, we are already, most of the glass that we are dealing with has been used already. So we are doing well on that. However, there are still many problems that have many resources that need to be improved on that, and we are still far away from this model where we have to take out less while still being able to consume, because otherwise we are going to get to a point where we are not going to be able to consume because there is not going to be enough to consume from. However, we are going to have a lot of waste that we can't really do anything with at this point. So it is absolutely necessary to, when already producing the product, be mindful of how the resources that are locked in it are going to be able to be reused after the product is consumed. And a big part of that is the 3R, so reuse, reduce, and recycle, the first two being most important. So making sure that when we buy things, we are mindful of what we are going, what's our long-term plan with them. And that is 100% not an anti-capitalist concept, because we don't have to think of consumption as a one-time thing. You're not buying a house to live there for a few months, to use it once and then dispose of it. Your plan is to live there as long as it's possible and keep it up in this state. And so the same way we should think about other things in life. And that may mean that we are going to have to spend more on when we first buy something, because it's going to be higher quality, for example, or it's going to have being made from materials that have a more reusable or recyclable products to them. However, in the long term, it's going to be both more profitable for us, but also much more beneficial for the environment. And that is an initiative that has to go mostly from the individual side, from the social side. Obviously, part of that is the entrepreneurs who need to accomplish that, but we have to expect it from them, because otherwise we are not going to get it. So in order to lower our greenhouse gas emissions, there are four main ways that this can and has to be accomplished. So first of all, it's lowering our energy consumption. On one side, that means not consuming it on things that we don't need, or on things that we are not absolutely having to spend it on. On the other side, it's also making sure that when we are spending it, that is being spent well and that is being used in the best way possible, in the most efficient way. So, for example, by introducing more sustainable light production, or being able to, or wasting less energy on the way, also changing our behaviors and how we are consuming energy. But in terms of that, it's also important to consider where the energy comes from, and that is having to look at finding new ways of getting energy. For example, the renewables, nuclear, but also even if we have to use some transitionary methods, the goal should always be reaching energy without having to, on one side, depreciate our resources without a long-term solution, and on the other, destroy our environment whilst doing that. Then we need to also consider lowering meat consumption. I know it's a very problematic topic, and I'm not advocating for all of us to go vegan because it's unrealistic. However, we need to work on alternatives to getting that done, because the current impact of the meat industry on the global environment is horrendous, and we absolutely need to consider ways how we can minimize that, whether it's through synthetic foods or supplements or substitutes to meat. For example, with plant-based meat that is now more and more similar to both in contents and in how it tastes to regular meat. Obviously, it's still far away from here, but it absolutely needs to be looked at and needs to be further developed if we want to achieve environmental goals. And the last main part, obviously there are much more to lowering our greenhouse gas emissions, is clean industries. So making it more profitable, moving more in this direction, where we are producing things without impacting the world in such a way as we did before, and we are already moving in this direction. As with all the other aspects, we are moving in the direction of being more clean in production of things. We are putting filters. We are using less water. We are taking less resources. However, still there is a long way to go, and we should continue striving in this direction, because industry, after all, is what is producing all our goods, but also producing a lot of the vast majority of the externalities that we are dealing with in this problem with greenhouse gas emissions. So, in terms of the clean sources of energy, the main ones that we should look at is nuclear power, solar power, wind power, geothermal power, hydropower, and biomass. And when looking at that, it is crucial to make sure that we are not using them just based on copy pasting from other places. We need to, every time that we are thinking about introducing more solar power, wind power, any other type of the power sources here, they all have to be adjusted to the place where we are, where it's located. So, for example, you wouldn't build a solar power plant in northern Scotland where it's raining all the time, and you wouldn't build a wind power plant in the middle of a forest. It sounds obvious, but it very much is a concern. And for example, I personally had the opportunity to work with the Cardiff City Council, which was proposing to build a solar power plant in the town. The problem is that Cardiff is one of the most rainiest places in Europe, and whilst it would have some effect for some part of the year, overall it would have been a economic and environmental disaster. It would make no sense, and would rather discourage people from this kind of improvements rather than encourage them. So we have to be very mindful of what we are using and when, so that it's most profitable and most useful. So another aspect is limiting the impact and how we can, the different restoration efforts that we can go with. So in order to do that, we have to look at different ways that we are already impacting the world and how it is being affected by our everyday use of it, our all decisions that we are making, both on the government and on the individual level, and whether that's reforesting or whether that's, for example, building bridges over our roads so that they are more or less negative towards the environment, so that the deers, for example, can pass, and in general various animals can pass on the other side of the forest. We need to figure out ways to do that, and obviously it does require spending a bit more. However, in the long run, for example, you're not going to have as many casualties among deers, and that's also going to affect fewer insurance claims for cars, and it's going to affect also fewer traffic jams caused by such an accident, which, when we consider the implicit cost of that, it might be, and it often is, that building such a bridge is less expensive than having to deal in the long run with the implications of having animals run across roads and die. And the same thing with reforestation efforts. Through even though they are expensive, they take up land, they affect, for example, floodings. You are going to have fewer floods if you have forest nearby, because the water drains better into the ground and stays rather than evaporates, which then contributes, or for example, flowing past it and hitting the town. Instead, it stays in the ground, and, for example, also prevents droughts. So there are various positive aspects of being on good terms with the environment, and they have to make sure that we are using them for both our and the environment's advantage. So moving on to the bottom-up efforts, I decided to point to 5 aspects here that are necessary, and these are the social change, as we talked before, so making sure that people are on board and people are themselves engaging in the transition, the lifestyle adjustments, so the transition itself, the fact that people are making decisions that have positive impact, that they are leading their everyday lives for them to be more environmentally friendly. Then we have conscious consumerism, which ties into especially the market side here, where you are making decisions with your wallet that improve the environment, that limit the scope of the negative effect on the environment of production of various goods and of your consumption. And then we have various NGO efforts, so non-governmental organizations, and how we can contribute to that, how we can together work with them and achieve reforms, achieve pretty much a green revolution without having to wait for the government to do something, but rather having a direct impact on the positive change. Then we also have community work. So rather than having to look at other places, like, for example, spending money to, or not only spending money to improve the sea turtle population, for example, New Galapagos, which is obviously important, but it doesn't hit us that personally. We can also think about how us being inside our communities, how we can make a positive change. And that's what we are going to be talking about as well. Okay, so there are various aspects of social change that we need to look at and how it can be accomplished. So from the start, education plays a big role. The fact that people are being taught both at schools and that can be at schools, and also can be like YouTube videos or documentaries that you watch. You're learning about your impact on the world and the impact of various aspects of our way of living, of what's happening on the other side of the globe. Any way that we can learn more about what can be done and what are the issues is a good way to affect social change and to bring this change to a point where it can have a really impact on the world. And a big part of that is also social pressure. So it might sound draconic, but actually a completely normal thing. So the fact that you talk to your parents, for example, or your kids or your friends about the fact that, well, they should be more concerned about the environment, or have you heard about or have you heard about this nice product, or have you heard about this terrible product that takes away like waste water, for example, in Mexico, and you shouldn't be using that. Why are you using that? That itself is already a factor that pushes a positive change. Obviously, it's not always targeted well. That's why we need to be informed. That's why education is necessary. But either way, it is in our the ball is in our field, and we need to kick it in the right direction and make sure that that we encourage people to move in such a way as to improve our impact on the world. And moving beyond our social circle, a big part of that is activism. So that's something that if you are members of the Students for Liberty, I'm sure you are more than acquainted with. But as you know, activism is a hugely powerful tool. So being able to walk to someone or show to someone you've never seen before, you've never would otherwise have an ability to talk with before, and show them, hey, look at this issue, you should care about it, and here is how you can resolve it. That's a tool that we should more and more engage with, and not only as the likes of the Extinction Rebellion, for example, tend to do it, just focusing on the issues part. We also need to make sure that we are showing people how they can also change things, how they can also affect a positive change. Because if we only focus on the issue part, then they are just going to focus on bringing attention, but not actually making any changes. They're going to continue making the same mistakes, the same problems with the environment, the same detrimental actions that they have been doing before. And a big part of that, of changing that as well, is campaigns. So either through politics or through companies, for example, running campaigns, or NGOs working with companies, or just various groups running some targeted campaigns about solving some issues, or directly trying to affect a change that is, for example, a single narrow thing, like, for example, the beach cleanups. That was a big campaign, or anti-straws movements, which itself they didn't have much impact in the scope of limiting all of waste. However, they had a lot of impact in limiting this one particular thing. And if we take this one particular thing and we multiply it by all the different small particular things, we're going to have a much bigger impact. And the last part, which ties into the social pressure, but is more lenient, let's say, is personal ties. So whoever you can reach with your voice, with your actions, showing them how things can be done, not necessarily directly, but for example, the fact that you are segregating waste, and that is just part of your routine, and thus you show to your kids how it works, that's already a huge step, because they are going to teach the next generation. And if you are able to show to someone how things can be better, whether they want to listen or not, you don't have to knock them into doing that. You can just do it next to them, and they can learn from you, and that's also going to be very important. Yes. So in terms of the lifestyle adjustments that need to be done for someone to improve the impact on the world, lowering the carbon footprint, for example, we can start from limiting your waste, limiting how much you waste water, you waste resources, products, consumption. Some of them already talked about, so I'm not going to repeat it. But in general, making sure that everything that gets out of your house is not going to, it's either unused, it's either not useful anymore, or it's going to go in a direction where it's going to be used again or recycled. And obviously now we have a bit of a recycling crisis with plastics. However, we are still moving in a direction where it's improving, and with many other resources we can still recycle them, and we recycle them better than ever. But it only makes it more important to make sure that whatever we are consuming, whatever we are wasting, it doesn't go in vain. And that ties into mindful consumption. So making good consumption decisions, using resources that we know are used well. So, for example, making sure that whatever we do, in terms of what we buy, it is not going to be thrown out the next day, but it's actually going to contribute to a longer term positive impact. And then another point, which is more tied into not all of the population, however, we can all at least participate in it a bit, is green investments. So making financial decisions that contribute to improvement of our environment. So rather than investing in BP or Shell, investing in Tesla or investing in other companies that are environmentally friendly, or encouraging thus the various methods that we are improving our world. And what we can also do, and what actually a lot of individuals, currently the majority of individuals of the age between 15 and 30, is making career choices where we're going to make a positive impact. So you don't have to be a person that is directly working in environmental goals in order to make a positive career impact, positive environmental impact with your career choices. But for example, deciding to work in PR or in accounting for a company that is more environmentally friendly rather than less environmentally friendly, that itself shows that they should be more environmentally friendly. And then pushing reforms within this company that make it even greener, that is what we should be striving for, and what we should be thinking about more and more when making our choices for the future. And the last point, that I don't know why it moved, but it should be commuting greener, so a greener commute. And on one side, that means more electromobility, more public transport, more use of cars when they are actually needed. Like when you don't have to use a car, you can walk somewhere, or you can ride somewhere on a bus, or in a tram, or on a electric scooter. It's better to do that than not. Obviously, it sounds banal to say, but it is important to think about, because it is a big adjustment over time that can actually make a big change. So the aspect of conscious consumerism, it is vital to think about our choices in terms of consumption whenever we have the opportunity to consume anything. And a good example of that is car sales. Cars are usually a big investment, and people tend to take much more time before buying a car rather than buying bread in a grocery store. And we can see that people are actually making decisions, making decisions with their wallets that are both going to benefit them and benefit the environment, because more and more people now are buying, for example, electric cars, which are now still a bit more expensive to buy. However, they are however, they are less expensive to use. Power is cheaper than oil, and it is thus easier and more profitable to someone to use this car than a petrol-powered one. And you can see that despite a drop in car sales in the US over time in general, there is a constant growth, and actually an exponential growth even in the last few years of electric car sales. So whilst the demand for cars in general drops, the demand for electric cars keeps increasing. And that shows that the conscious consumerism aspect, although it is partially encouraged by subsidies, in general still making a positive change for the car market, and in general for our sustainability. So considering NGOs, we often think that when there is a problem, if it's big enough, it means that the government should do it. Like, for example, if there is a huge natural disaster, we don't cry for NGOs to do something. We give government our money, and they have the resources to do it, so let them do it. However, when we look at the scope of the change that is being that is happening across the world, a lot of that for the environmental side is done by NGOs, so by non-governmental organizations, by charities, by things that are privately owned and privately financed, and their impact is incredible. Is, for example, WWF is currently planning to plant 1 trillion trees, which is a huge number. It's a number that is impossible to even picture. And they are doing that. The vast majority of the finance comes from private people, so private investors, people who fund them without having to do so. And we have to, when thinking about the environmental change, we have to focus more and more on being able to fund these organizations, on being able to make this change without having to wait for governmental change. And that is a topic that is coming back and back again, about us being able to make changes ourselves. And even if it's donating a bit, or like 1-2 euros per month to a charity that we believe is making good change. And we have to trust, we have to make sure that we trust this organization. And they are going to do whatever they can, as that they know you trust them. And we have to think more about how we spend our funds in a way that can bring a positive change through, for example, charity work. And then, without even spending much funds, we can also bring positive change to our communities. And we can do that through many ways, from trail cleanups to community gardens. But in general, the principle is that without coercion, without having to pay to an external entity, you can use your time, use your personal resources in a way that you see fit, and make a change that is going to positively impact both the local environment and the local community. And that is a big aspect of the environmental aspect of the environmental approach that does not require, or that does not focus on the governmental side. So think about the government. What does the government actually do in terms of the environment? And on one side, the government does help environmental efforts. However, on the other, it also undermines a lot of environmental effort. So how is it possible that this happens? Well, the government does a lot of things, and one thing that it likes doing, and that it does a lot, is regulations. So passing policies that limit the ability of someone or some group or a company to be able to do something. And this can have positive and can have negative impacts, both from a market environmentalist side and in general from a environmentalist aspect. So for example, even if we are free marketeers, we can notice that the ban on freons, so on substances that were used in fridges and in other cooling equipment that contributed to destroying the ozone layer. The ban of this contributed positively to the environment, and the companies managed to switch fairly quickly. They weren't impacted that much by this change, because the change was narrow, it had very wide popular support, and it also had a certain support from the companies as well. that's why the public support is incredibly important. However, a lot of regulations are going completely against the environment. There are a lot of regulations against renewable resources, against international trade, investments, green investments especially, about being able to use your land in such a way that is going to contribute to the environment. And or for example, using electromobility, many cities still prevent people from using electric scooters or from renting electric scooters. So we need to look at all this and deeply consider which regulations are helping whom. Who is actually benefited by not being able to use an electric scooter in the city, and for example, for not being able to set up your own solar panel on your roof and be able to achieve some level of profit from that. Well, a lot of that is through interest groups, for example, or through companies that don't want this positive change. But a lot of that is just from some very old regulations that have been done for a certain reason and are outdated. However, they are so long, so deep in the political machine that they are hard to get rid of. However, we still need to eliminate a lot of them in order to be able to achieve good solutions for the environment. So another thing that the government does is it subsidizes things. So on one side, it does subsidize, for example, electric cars, but also on another side, it subsidizes things like coal plants, oil companies that are not environmentally sustainable. It can subsidize setting up for some like pipeline, or in general, or cutting down forests. Because of its wide interests, the government tends to fight on both fronts, and it tends to also hit itself in the process. And by making sure that it is much more directed towards only one solution and not the others, and hopefully the green solutions, a lot of the problems that we are facing right now can be resolved without having to introduce new legislations. It's just eliminating the spending, the public spending that we already have, that is so wasteful. And speaking about spending, a big aspect of what government does is taxation. So taxing individuals, which then causes them to be able to spend less on things that are more environmentally friendly, or on charities that can contribute, but also taxing companies. The power to tax is an important one. And whilst the market environmentalist aspect generally agrees that all taxes in this case are a burden, the ones that from a pragmatic perspective we can look at first without having to really fight the non-market environmentalist side is to eliminate or limit taxes that are on industries that are environmentally friendly, or on initiatives. So, for example, on bonds and loans that are contributing to the environment. So the interest from them that is not taxed, for example, that itself is it would be an incredible initiative to further invest into the green market. Then, speaking about investments, the government tends to invest a lot in various projects. Partially that is subsidies, but a lot of that is just it's doing its work, making new things and deciding upon where the money is spent. And again, it often spends on things that it shouldn't spend from the environmental side. However, what it also does, which is important, is it educates. The government plays a big role in education. It can educate both for the better and for the worse. And it often does for both. And once we did benefit from learning in our schools about recycling, the government also goes away and talks about how coal is very important, or how we need to stay on track with oil, and that educational authority is problematic, and we need to make sure that the government is on its track for a greener activism in terms of education. And then considering grand scale projects,